This is the second lesson in a two-part series on constructing fighting positions. Since this is the second part of the series on constructing fighting positions, you must have already completed part 1. If you have not, go back now and complete part 1. Everyone needs protection. A boxer can protect himself by using his hands and arms. You can protect yourself by constructing a good fighting position. By the end of this lesson, you will have learned valuable information on constructing a fighting position. You will know how to construct overhead cover. You will be able to make improvements to your fighting position as time permits. You will be able to correctly construct side and rear protection. And finally, you will be able to construct camouflage to conceal you from air and ground observation. Now, let's review what you learned in part 1 of this series. First, you remember that the location of your fighting position was designated by your squad leader, fire team leader, and he also assigned you a sector of fire. The first step, then, is to mark your sector off. Next, you must partially clear your field of fire and dig a hasty position. Then, you complete digging in as time and conditions permit. You should also build frontal protection as you dig if there isn't sufficient cover material to protect your position. Next, complete clearing the field of fire by removing obstructions that would obscure a clear view of an approaching enemy. Finally, camouflage your position by using natural materials in the area. Be careful not to take too much from any one area because the enemy can see where vegetation has been stripped. Now, let's see what a good fighting position looks like when it is finished. This position has natural rear and front protection, the boulder and log. Without them, the airmen would have built parapets and camouflaged them from enemy observation. Now that we have reviewed the first lesson, let's move on to the subject of overhead cover. Overhead cover is used as protection from indirect fire, and it also conceals you from air observation. Now that you know how important overhead cover is, we'll look at two basic ways to construct overhead cover. Let's look at the fighting overhead cover approach first. It allows you to continue fighting while you are protected. To construct fighting overhead cover, place logs on top of each other along the entire length of the front and rear protection. The logs should be about 4 to 6 inches in diameter. Once your support base is in place, you position logs side by side across the support as shown here. Next, place a poncho or other waterproof material over the logs. Ensure whatever you use will shed water when it rains. When your waterproof cover material is in place, add 6 to 8 inches of dirt. Then mold and blend it as much as possible to match the slope of the terrain. Then you apply natural camouflage to conceal your overhead cover. When this is completed, you will have protection against indirect fire fragmentation while still being able to fire at the enemy. Your total overhead protection, which includes support cover material and dirt, should be about 14 inches. Now, let's continue with the second type of overhead cover, flank overhead cover, which is constructed to the side of the position. Flank overhead cover should be constructed when the fighting overhead cover would increase the silhouette of the position enough to make it easily spotted by the enemy. To construct flank overhead cover, begin at one end of your fighting position. Dig out to a depth of about 12 inches and save the sod for camouflage. Next, put the supporting logs, planks, or whatever is available across the area to support the rest of the overhead cover material. Using the dirt from the trench you dug, cover the top of the supporting material and then replace the sod in whatever camouflage is needed. Remember, make it look natural. The last step is to get into your fighting position and dig out a cave-like compartment under the supporting material. Make it large enough so that both occupants of the position can use it at the same time. This completes the construction of flank overhead cover. Here are some additional tips for building your overhead cover. First, get your cover support material from places far to the rear of your defensive position. Your squad leader, fire team leader, will normally point out locations for this. Never remove material from in front of your position, except that which is necessary for clearing fields of fire. And don't take it from any place near your position, which might reduce your natural concealment and might expose your position to the enemy. As you dig your position, pile the dirt onto a poncho to save for reinforcing the overhead cover, for constructing front, rear, and side protection. The dirt you don't use should be removed and hidden. Your squad leader, fire team leader, will select some place for you to hide the extra dirt. This should be some place where the dirt cannot be seen from either the ground or from the air, such as a depression in the ground, under foliage, or hidden behind walls where it cannot be detected by the enemy. By now you are probably wondering which kind of overhead to construct in different situations. A few practice exercises will help you better recognize when to use the fighting overhead cover and where to use the flank overhead cover. What type of overhead cover would best fit in with this type of open level terrain? In open terrain, you should normally use flank overhead cover to blend in with the terrain. Now look at this illustration. Here you are in the edge of a wooded area with trees and vegetation to the side and behind you, and overhead as well. What type of overhead cover would easily fit into this terrain? If you answered fighting overhead cover, you are correct. Fighting overhead cover is preferred whenever possible since it allows you to continue fighting. Now we will discuss some ways you can improve your fighting position as time and priority of tasks permit. We will discuss each of these areas one at a time. One way to improve the position is to make a drainage trench. Do this by sloping the floor toward the center, then scoop out a shallow trench to direct the water to the front wall. Another improvement is a grenade sump, shown here in a cutaway view. Dig at a 45-degree angle as deep as you can with your entrenching tool. The mouth of the sump should be smooth and wide enough so you can kick grenades into it easily. The next way you can improve your fighting position is to dig elbow holes. Elbow holes are used to aid you in firing your weapon. This easy improvement also helps lower your silhouette. Put in limiting stakes to mark the left and right limit of your sector of fire. Aiming stakes are put in so you can fire accurately at dangerous approaches during periods of limited visibility. Rocks can be used if you don't have stakes. Be sure to conceal stakes or rocks so the enemy can't spot you. Spend your available time productively because no position is perfect. You should constantly be thinking of ways you can improve your position. Some soils are not well suited for a typical fighting position. For example, sandy soil can cave in easily whether it is wet or dry. Other soils generally won't cave in unless they get wet. One way to prevent cave-in is to strengthen or rivet the sides of your position with cut saplings or other suitable materials. These materials might include such things as shell casings, ammunition boxes, sandbags, scrap metals, chicken wire, corrugated metal, scrap lumber, and the like. Of course, any riveting will be only as good as you make it. So far, we have learned several ways to improve your fighting position. It's time for a practice exercise to review what you've learned. What are some improvements that could be made to this fighting position? Press the restart button to continue the program. These are just a few of the improvements you could have identified. Hopefully, you identified several more than these. Now, let's look at fighting position variation. This sequence will include the one-man fighting position and the modified two-man fighting position. The one-man fighting position can be used when the terrain and sector coverage dictates its use. It is most commonly used by the squad leader to centrally position himself in the squad. It can be used by other members of the squad when directed by the squad leader. The standard two-man fighting position that you have learned to construct covers sectors on both sides of the position. It also allows better communication and gives you a better chance of receiving aid from a buddy. Although the two-man position is standard and the most often used, it isn't always the best in some situations. One reason is that you may not be able to cover your sector of fire. Now we will explain the modified two-man position. You can modify the position by extending one or both ends of the position along the sides of the frontal protection. This allows maximum observation and fields of fire to the front. The additional space is also useful during rest or sleep periods, since one person can observe and cover the entire sector of fire while the other rests. Another advantage is that if you receive suppressive fire from the front, you can move back to gain the protection of the frontal cover like you would in the standard position. By moving about 1 meter, you can continue to select and engage targets to the front during lulls in the enemy fire. With proper use of the terrain, your squad defense position would normally consist of several modified two-man positions, separated two-man positions, and positions for any key weapons such as machine guns. Now for some questions. Here is a fighting position. What should be done to make it a modified fighting position? If you answered that one or both ends should be extended around the frontal protection, you are correct. There are two ways a person can shoot from a modified fighting position. What are they? You can shoot to the front of the modified position, and you have a field of fire to the flank. Flank and rear protection are our next topics. Natural protection is better when it is available. It takes less time to prepare, and it is harder for the enemy to detect. It appears to be a natural feature because it is a natural feature. Flank and rear protection provides cover from enemy direct fire and the effects of friendly supporting fire. If natural features do not provide flank and rear protection for you, then you must construct them. Be sure to camouflage them as you see here. If you are in a situation where your position can be spotted from the air, you will need to build overhead camouflage to break up shadows and hide your position. You can use nets, shrubs, loosely woven branches, and the like. Here are some questions for a self-evaluation on your basic skills in combat tactics and techniques. Here, you see two illustrations. One is open terrain, and the other is wooded terrain with heavy vegetation. What type of overhead cover would best fit each type of terrain? You should use flank overhead cover in level and open terrain, and fighting overhead cover in heavily vegetated terrain. Remember that whenever possible, fighting overhead cover is preferred because it allows you to continue fighting while being protected. Here you see that the modified two-man position allows these airmen to fire to the front and to the flanks. What is another advantage of the modified two-man position? It allows one man to observe the front and cover both sectors of fire, while the other man eats or sleeps or works to improve the position. Name two position improvements that can improve your ability to fire. Digging elbow holes to stabilize your arms and lower your body position is one improvement. The other is to add limiting stakes and aiming stakes so that you can deliver accurate fire during periods of reduced visibility. This concludes the lesson on constructing fighting positions and the improvements you can make on them. If you had difficulty understanding any portion of this program, go back and review as necessary.